Tonight we're gonna focus on Leviticus 16. I was thinking perhaps we could, well, I guess I'll say that later on regarding future studies, basing each study on a chapter of scriptures and whatever chapter you guys want, basically. So tonight we're gonna focus on Leviticus 16 because a request regarding sacrifices and regarding the death of the two witnesses, as in contrast basically with the death of the Messiah, Yahushua, as the Lamb of Pesach. So that's pretty much going to be the focus for tonight's study. Hopefully everybody will learn and understand. Hopefully the signal is fine. One computer says it's fine, the other one says it's not, so you guys will let me know, please. So like I said, we're going to focus tonight on Leviticus 16, which has to do with the day of Yom Kippur, which happens to be soon, which is pretty cool also because we're going to be able to understand what the day means, what the sacrifices represent, and also we're going to be able to talk a little bit about the importance of those sacrifices, what they meant, why they were done, and how they are fulfilled through the sacrifices that Yahweh would make by sending his son and then the two witnesses at the end of times. So I'm going to begin with Leviticus 16, and as always, you can start sending your questions regarding the subject. You can see in the title, so the questions can be regarding the two witnesses regarding the day of Yom Kippur. So Leviticus 16 starts saying, "Now Yahweh spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron." This right here is key, because right there the Almighty is letting us know that this day has to do with the death of two people. That the day that is going to be discussed on Leviticus 16 has to do with the death of two priests, because they were the sons of Aaron. And although most people, I'm sure, will just interpret, and mostly because the Christian doctrine, which is pretty common to hear that, at least it was for me, when it comes to the death of the two sons of Aaron, they kind of teach it as if they were evil people and that's why that happened to them. However, in Judaism, it's taught a whole different way, which is basically that they were so just and so set apart that making just one little mistake deserved that punishment. In Judaism, it's also taught that these two sons of Aaron were even greater than Moshe and Aaron, and they would become the leaders if they were not killed on this occasion. So that is a important key to understand what this whole chapter means. In the chapter before the 16, the last verse, I'm just going to read, says from 31, "Thus you shall separate the children of Israel from the uncleanness, lest they die in the uncleanness when they defile my tabernacle that is among them." So it keeps going. It's talking about laws concerning purity. And I just wanted to see these because all of a sudden, after talking about these laws, Yahweh mentions that this chapter regarding the Day of Atonement happened right after the death of these two people. So now Yahweh spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they offered profane fire before Yahweh. Here it is translated profane fire in Hebrew. It says, which is also important, Here, when it says that Yahweh spoke, the verb that is being used is dabar, or well, in this case, dabeir, which is that he spoke, but comes from dabar, which is word. As we know, Yahushua is the word. So it's as if Yahweh was speaking through Mashiach to Moshe and Aharon. And it says, after the death of the two sons of Aharon, it just says when they came close to the face of Yahweh and died. So that's why for instance, in the King James Version, in the New King James Version, it says when they offered, and then they write profane fire, trying to explain something that the scriptures are not saying, because they brought some fire, and that is in the story that when they died, and we would have to go to that story to explain it also if we had more time, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to have that time, so we could do it on another study, of course. So we see that they brought certain fire that was not the fire that Yahweh was saying that they had to bring for the offerings that they were given. So the fact that they brought different fire than the one that they were supposed to bring to the temple, which was just one that was lit every day, all day. So it was set apart, and basically it was as in the Exodus when Yahweh, he himself sent fire from heaven to start that fire that they would carry with the Mishkan. So this connects to the fact that Eliyahu, when he made also an offering sending, well, when the priests of Baal, which Baal in English is the Lord, when the priests of the Lord were worshiping him, and there were 400 of them, there was only Eliyahu as the prophet of Yahweh. At least that's what he thought. But then Yahweh told him that there were other people, but they were hidden as the chosen few, basically 7,000 of them, representing the 144,000. So Eliyahu, at that moment, it was just himself against 850, because there were some that were with the Lord and some that were with the spirit of Astarte or Asera, Semiramis, who is now worshipped as Mary, as Jeremiah calls her the Queen of Heaven, and as they also call her, or the mother of, well, they give her a lot of titles. And as you guys know already, I believe, and I hope, those who worship Mary are not worshiping who they believe they are worshiping, the mother of Messiah. The mother of Messiah's name was Miriam, and is Miriam, and she is fine in paradise, waiting for resurrection and everything that Yahweh has for her. But none of the things that Catholicism teaches about her is actually regarding Messiah's mother, is regarding this other spirit called in Jeremiah the Queen of Heaven, which is actually an evil spirit. Is basically earthly or diabolical wisdom, as it is called in the New Testament, because there is the wisdom of Yahweh, which is heavenly wisdom, and then there is the evil wisdom, which is that of which is used by Lucifer and the other Satans that I have discussed here, as Samael and Azazel, for instance. So, going back to the Day of Atonement, the fact that it starts with the two sons of Aaron that died by bringing fire that was not the one that they were supposed to, connects to the fact that Eliyahu brought two animals, one for Baal and one for Yahweh. He gave time to those of Baal to worship and praise the Lord, to see if he was real, and send fire and burn that offering. However, nothing happened. So then Eliyahu, when they were done, he did his thing and asked Yahweh to bring fire from heaven, and it happened. So at that moment, that was a proof that Yahweh is the real Elohim and not the Lord that they were worshiping. As nowadays, most people are worshiping the Lord, claiming that it is the same than Yahweh from scriptures. So it's the same story going on that is going to happen also at the end of times, because as we see in the book of Revelations, chapter 13, it says on verse 13, talking about the false prophet, the second beast. There will be two beasts that are mentioned in Revelation 13. The first is a world leader. The second is a false prophet, a religious leader. So it says on verse 13 regarding this false prophet, which is, since is the false prophet, is the evil messenger sent from Satan to basically copy or go against the one that Yahweh sends, which is Eliyahu. So Yahweh said that he would send three people, as I have mentioned it in previous studies, because for different reasons, but one would be Eliyahu to prepare the way and do other things, be the voice in the wilderness. Then Messiah, who is the Kohen Hagadol, or the high priest, who through his blood forgives our sins. And then the Melech Gadol, which is the great king, which is the witness like Moshe. So these three people are the ones sent by Yahweh. And then Satan, who copies everything, sends the false Messiah instead of the real Messiah, Yahushua. They have created one for the world with an image and his own name, instead of the name above every name, which is Yahushua. I repeat. Then the Satan will send the false prophet, as Yahweh sends Eliyahu. And Satan will send the beast, the world leader, instead of the Melech Hagadol, or the witness like Moshe, who will be king. Yahushua, the first coming of Yahweh on earth, is the root of David. That's why he came as the seed, and the seed is the word of Yahweh. And Revelation 13 says that Revelation 19:13 says that the word of Yahweh is the name of Messiah. So Yahushua is the seed which becomes the root of David. After that comes the branch of David, which is natural. First the root, then comes the stem, and then the branch, and then the fruit. So Yahushua is the root. The congregation that started to grow after he resurrected and gave the Spirit in Shavuot is the stem that started to grow from the earth. And then came the apostasy, which basically destroyed that was growing. But as Yahweh prophesied in Isaiah 11, from the stem of Yeshai, a branch would grow and it would give fruit. That branch is the second coming of Yahweh on earth, the second manifestation, as one of the two witnesses of Revelation 11, just like Yahushua came next to Yahuhanan, known as John the Baptist. Now, the second coming of Yahweh is coming next to Eliyahu. So just like 2,000 years ago, Yahweh sent two people, now he's sending two people, like Revelation 11 prophesied. And these two people are as Moshe and Aaron. So, as I was reading in Revelation 13 regarding the false prophet, who is as Eliyahu, in the sense of the evil Eliyahu, meaning the one that Satan sends to counteract what the prophet Eliyahu will do in the end times. And just like Eliyahu, as I was saying, asked Yahweh, and Yahweh sent fire from heaven to burn the offering that he had made. Now the false prophet who tries to copy Eliyahu will copy that miracle, basically, which was amazing, an amazing story in the Old Testament, and he will do it in order to make the whole world follow him and the false Messiah that he will direct the world to. So in this case, it says in verse 13 of chapter 13, he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. So the greatest sign that the false prophet will perform and that the whole world will see is that he will bring fire from heaven. When we read that, that takes us straight to Eliyahu, who did it way back. And as I already explained the story and the reason why the false Eliyahu, the false prophet, would be doing this. He will this time tell the people to actually worship the Lord, and he will use technology to make fire come down from heaven and make everybody think that the Lord is the true Elohim, the true mighty one. And instead of killing an animal, this time he will kill the two witnesses, because he will be seen by everybody in the world who wants them dead, as it is written in Revelation 11. So I came to this chapter because in Yom Kippur, Yahweh make reference to the two sons of Aaron who brought a different fire, and that's why they were killed, basically, as we are seeing pretty much on Yom Kippur. And I say that because of the fact that when Yahweh is about to say the laws regarding Yom Kippur, he first mentions the death of these two tzaddikim, basically, according to what I was saying about them. So it's also interesting that everybody sees those two, or most people see those two sons as evil, just because the way things happen. But I repeat, according to Judaism, they were really set apart. I say that because the two witnesses will be set apart according to Yahweh, but according to the world they will be evil, and that's why it will be fair to kill them. Now, in case no one has connected the stories that I already mentioned, the fact that they brought a different fire, and that's why they were killed, they died, and it's connected to Yom Kippur, and they were too, is because just like Eliyahu brought fire from heaven, now the false prophet will bring fire from heaven to kill the two witnesses. So a fire brought from heaven by a false prophet is basically profane fire, a fire that Yahweh did not send, not the fire that is for the proper use in the temple. So the fact that these two men died because of that reason is to bring us to Revelation 13, when two men will die from profane fire brought down from heaven by the false prophet trying to copy Eliyahu, who brought down fire from heaven to burn the offering that he had for Yahweh. So just in that first verse, there is a huge connection to the two witnesses and the day and the way they will die. I'm gonna see if there are any questions. Nothing so far. Okay, Metis says this passage is perfect to connect easily the last with the Yom Bullock. That's right, exactly. Aliyah says, is that the anti-Mashiach? That whom? You mean the false Messiah? I mean the false prophet that I've been mentioning? If that is the case, no. Unfortunately, in Christianity, they call, well, I already said three people, right? The evil ones. One will be, according to Revelation 13, The first will be the world leader, the beast, the first beast. Then a second beast that will be a religious leader, that will be the false prophet. Some Christian doctrines claim that the world leader is the Antichrist. Other Christian doctrines claim that the false prophet is the Antichrist. However, they are both wrong, because these two will work together in order to bring the real Antichrist, which is called the abomination of desolation. It will be an idol that man will make, most likely in a lab or in vitro or something like that, or both. And that body will have as the soul Abaddon, who will come out of the abyss in the fifth trumpet in Revelation 9, and the spirit of Lucifer, who will come down from heaven in Revelation 12. So, just as it is taught in Christianity that man is made by a body, a soul, and a spirit, the false Messiah who tries to copy what Yahweh does will have a body in which there will be an inclination to do evil, as every flesh, which basically is Samael. Then the soul will be Abaddon, which I already mentioned. And then the spirit will be Lucifer, which is the spirit of the power of the air, as the scripture says. So Lucifer will be working as the spirit of the false Messiah. Azazel, which is in the abyss, which is in Sheol, the worst part of Sheol, but Sheol is where the souls go. Therefore, when he comes down, when he comes up from the abyss, that would be as the soul coming to the body, getting out of Sheol, which is basically what the scripture says, that the one that had a mortal wound to the head will live again and everybody will worship him. That is the image of the beast, whose soul, which is Abaddon, has been in the worst part of Sheol, which is called Abaddon. That's why the scripture gives him that name, and has been there for thousands of years. So he that was, is not, and will be the copy of Satan, of what Yahweh says, he that was, is, and will be. So Yahweh has always been and will always be. But when it comes to this temporal dimension, this reality, Satan has not been for a long time. When it comes to that spirit, that which I said that would come as the soul of the false Messiah that is in the abyss, has been there for thousands of years. Well, pretty much 5,000 years, maybe a little bit less, in the time of Enoch. So, in Christianity, I repeat, just in case, some say that the world leader is the Antichrist, some say that the false prophet is the Antichrist, and unfortunately that's very wrong and very dangerous, because if they think that either of these two are the Antichrist, when the real Antichrist appears, they will believe is the real Christ, as they will call him. So they will receive him, and that's very dangerous. People need to understand, and that's what scripture says, not what I say, that there are two beasts and they work together to bring the image of the beast. That image is that idol that will speak, because it's not an idol as the ones that people have worshipped for thousands of years. It is an idol made of flesh and bones that will speak and kill everybody who doesn't worship him, because he will claim to be Christ and a lot of people will accept him as such. So, hope that is clear. And Medes, regarding the young bullock, I don't know if you were talking about because of the fact that Eliyahu brought down fire. That story, which also is a story to understand that the witness like Moshe is a bullock or a bull or an ox, as it appears in scripture several times. And both stories, this one that we are reading tonight is very clear also regarding that part. I'm glad, Vahid, that you like the study. Blessings. So I'll continue with Leviticus 16, once again, verse 1. Now Yahweh spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron. Like I was saying, in Hebrew, it doesn't mention the fire. It just says when they came close to the face of Yahweh. Remember that presence, which most scriptures translate as presence, in Hebrew is actually before the face of. So the fact that here says that they died when they came close to the face of Yahweh is as the fulfillment of what is written, that nobody can see Yahweh and keep living. That's why they died, because they saw Yahweh. And if they saw Yahweh, they could witness of Yahweh. That's why they represent the two witnesses of Revelation 11, who will see Yahweh's face once they finish their testimony of 1,260 days. So this verse is clear. And I repeat, unfortunately, the regular translations add words that are not there in the original scripture. So then the second verse says, and Yahweh said to Moshe, tell Aaron, your brother, not to come at just any time into the set apart place inside the veil, before the mercy seat, which is on the ark, lest he die, for I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. So, remember also, I have explained in other studies that, as Yahushua said, destroy the temple and I will build it in 3 days, I will raise it up in 3 days, he meant his body. And his body then became the congregation, of course, as we know. So, the congregation is the body of Messiah. But Messiah himself, well, he's the cornerstone. So he's the beginning of the temple. Each of the chosen few are one stone that is basically placed on Messiah. So once all the chosen few are sealed, the temple will be completely built. So Messiah, his body, is the temple. The Ark of the Covenant, where the two tablets of the 10 commandments were, that Ark of the Testimony, as it's also called, represents the witness, like Moshe, who will become king. That's why that Ark was the throne of Yahweh on earth, because the king on earth, a person, is actually a throne for the spirit of Yahweh to dwell in him. So the last is the throne, as the first is the temple. When I say first and last, I mean Yahweh coming to earth as the first and then as the last, as he said he would in Isaiah and many other parts. So Yahweh here is saying, and Yahweh said to Moshe, tell Aaron, your brother, not to come at just any time into the set apart place inside the veil. Remember that the most set apart place, behind two veils actually, because there was one veil at the entrance of the set apart place and one veil at the entrance of the most set apart place. And the ark was placed in the most set apart place, as well, it's also called other things, but I don't like to use those words as holy, for instance, because it has to do with the worship of the sun. So I rather use a better term. So, as I was saying, the most set apart place could only be accessed by the high priest, the Kohen Hagadol, which was Aaron. That's why Yahweh is telling Moshe to tell Aaron about this, because Aaron, as the high priest, was the only one who could come into the most set apart place. But even so, he could not come anytime. He could only enter once a year. And that time was the day of Yom Kippur, which is the day that we are about to celebrate. And that represents the death of the two witnesses, when they will enter the presence of Yahweh as the most set apart place. And once they do that, they will come for the chosen during harvest of Revelation 14 and bring them also to the presence of Yahweh. That's why in Revelation 11, and I guess that would be important also to read. In Revelation 11, it says, verse 11, now after 3.5 days, the breath of life from Yahweh entered them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, come up here. And they ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. In the same hour there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. In the earthquake 7,000 people were killed, and the rest were afraid and gave steam to the Elohim of heaven. The second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is coming quickly. So right there we saw the resurrection of the two witnesses, and they were taken up to heaven. What happens right after is key regarding what we were just saying. Verse 15 says, then the seventh angel sounded. That means that once the two witnesses resurrect and go up is when the last trumpet is sounds. So when the last trumpet sounds, as Paul said it, is when the harvest happens, when the transformation of the chosen few who are alive will happen at the last trumpet. He said it, is written in Corinthians, is written in Thessalonians, and it is very clear in the book of Revelations. Once the two witnesses resurrect, then the last trumpet will sound. That's why once the two witnesses die, the chosen few must get ready for what would come, because remember that Yahushua said, when you see the abomination of desolation in the place that it should not be, run to the mountains. So after the death of the two witnesses is when the false Messiah will present himself in the world as the real Messiah, and those who believed in the testimony of the two witnesses will have to act. That's why it says right after the resurrection, which will be 3.5 days after they died, the seventh angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of the world have become the kingdoms of our sovereign and of his Messiah. Once again, now kingdoms, because now the second coming happened. Before he came as the Kohen Gadol, as the priest, now he comes as the king. That's why once the two witnesses, from out of which one is the second coming, the second manifestation of Yahweh on earth, once he resurrects, then the kingdoms of the earth have become the kingdoms of Yahweh and his Messiah. Meaning now he's not only the priest, but he's also the king. This is key, once again. So, as I have always said, 2,000 years ago, he came as the Lamb of Pesach. 2,000 years ago, now he's coming as the Lion. That's why they won't be able to recognize him, because there are two different manifestations or two different ministries, two different ways of acting, in a way of, the things that he must fulfill, the things that Yahweh must make happen during these last days are completely different than what he did 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago, he brought forgiveness for it to be available for us in these times when he will bring justice. So now that he will bring justice, unless we have the mercy of Yahushua, then we would be in a lot of trouble. So that's why he had to come first as the priest to forgive, and now he comes as the king to punish. So, as I was reading, it says in Revelation 11, and the 24 elders who sat before Yahweh on the thrones fell on their faces and worshiped Yahweh, saying, we give you thanks. And he gives there a praise. After the praise that the 24 elders give Yahweh, verse 19 of that same chapter 11 of the two witnesses says something that is key. Then the temple of Yahweh was open in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. There are two things regarding that. Either the ark was not there, and it just got there, as when they officially opened the temple by Shlomo, which is a very similar image if we were to read all the chapters. Other way of seeing this is that the last of the two veils, the one that was right at the entrance of the most set apart place, was taken out, and that's why one can see the ark. So either the ark was not there, just as it wasn't there in the second temple, which is therefore the most logical conclusion, because Yahushua came when the temple had no ark, because Yahushua came as the first, as the temple, not as the ark. Now that the second coming happens through the two witnesses, through one of them, when he resurrects, then the ark is seen in the temple, because Yahushua is the temple and the last is the ark. So now that the first and last have done what they had to, now everything is fulfilled and everything is completed in heaven. So then the temple of Yahweh was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. That's why he is the one that confirms the covenant. Unfortunately, in Christianity, other than confusing the world leader or the false prophet both with the Antichrist, they also confuse the second coming with the Antichrist. It's amazing, the confusion. I know. So they confuse the second coming, since they don't understand the second coming and they just believe of a rapture, which is not a coming. They believe of a rapture, which won't happen as they believe it, as I have explained in other studies. The fact that they don't understand the second manifestation of Yahweh on earth makes it so that when they read certain verses regarding that manifestation, they believe is the Antichrist. So it's pretty dangerous also. And that's what happens in Daniel 9:27 when they read that it says that he will confirm the covenant. They say that is the Antichrist. However, a couple verses after that, it says that then the abomination will appear. The abomination is the Antichrist. So if the abomination appears after he confirms the covenant, how can he himself confirm the covenant if he appears afterwards? It makes no sense when we read it. And I said the verses, I'm not going to read them right now because it would take me forever, as this is taking me. So here, to finish with this, it says the temple of Elohim was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his temple. The ark of his covenant, that represents the throne of Yahweh on earth. The last, the second manifestation, who confirms the covenant. He's confirming the covenant through his death and resurrection, because Yahushua made the covenant through his death and resurrection. So the first made the covenant, as he said, through his blood, he made a covenant with the many. Now Daniel 9 says that the prince, who will become king, will confirm a covenant with the many. What covenant? The one that Yahushua made with the many. The fact that Daniel 9 says that that prince is a Roman is basically the only reason why they end up thinking that it is the beast or the Antichrist. But as Revelation 19 and as Isaiah 63 mainly, and many other verses of scriptures show, the second coming will be as a thief in the night, meaning it will look different than what expected. Yahushua said he will come as a thief in the night. Also, we know that Jacob dressed as Esau, his brother, in order to take the blessing. Esau became Rome and the false Jews of nowadays. So the fact that it says that it will come as a Roman has to do with the fact that it's as Jacob who dressed as a Roman in order to take the blessing. Just like Paul, who was a Hebrew, but actually was born as a Roman when it comes to his citizenship. So he was a Roman who happened to be genetically a Hebrew. That is a representation of the last, just like Peter is a representation of the first. The first coming, Paul the second. Um, and what I was saying regarding Isaiah 63, Yahweh said that he would come dressed in red. Red in Hebrew is Edom. Edom was the nickname of Esau. So the fact that he says that he will come dressed in red to confirm the covenant has to do with the fact that he comes as a Roman to the world, but he will confirm the covenant that Yahushua made 2,000 years ago. I hope everybody's following. So that was verse 2 of Leviticus 16. And Yahweh said to Moshe, tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time into the most set apart place inside the veil before the mercy seat, which is on the ark. Mercy seat, which is on the ark. The ark of the covenant was a seat, was a throne, but was always empty according to everybody, because they didn't see any idol on top of it. However, as we know, Yahweh did not allow the congregation to have any idols, because his presence would be there, and his presence is invisible. He is the light that lit up that room, which had no light, therefore was completely dark, and that's why it was written that Yahweh said that he will dwell in the darkness. So he says, tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time in the set apart place inside the veil before the mercy seat, which is on the ark, lest he die. For I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. We just saw in Revelation 11 that the two witnesses go up in a cloud, just like Messiah in Acts 1 went up in a cloud. Verse 3 says, thus Aaron shall come into the most set apart place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering, and of a ram as a burnt offering. As I just said, Eliyahu, the prophet Eliyahu, who then would come as one of the two witnesses of Revelation 11, he brought fire from heaven several times. Actually, he was known for that, so much so that when Yahushua was on earth, a couple of his disciples, his Talmidim, came to him and asked him if he wanted them to bring fire from heaven. And Yahushua told them and asked them basically if they did not know what was the spirit that he was bringing, that Yahushua was bringing, basically making a difference between Messiah's spirit and the spirit shown through Eliyahu. And there are several reasons for that, but I will only mention one, and it's the fact that Yahushua was bringing mercy while Eliyahu brought judgment. So when they came to Yahushua asking for that, basically they had a wrong idea regarding Yahushua and what he had to do. He came to forgive, not to destroy, not to avenge, as the two witnesses have to do. That's why fire comes from their mouths, as we see in Revelation 11. So Eliyahu is very connected to fire. Eliyahu, along the scriptures, we see several connections with the ram. Eliyahu as a prophet is one that Yahweh uses to speak to the people. That's why he's the voice in the wilderness. A horn, which becomes a shofar and is used as basically a trumpet to call the people to get ready for war or assembly for Yahweh. The horn, the shofar, represents basically a prophet. It represents a human for different reasons, but mainly a prophet through whom spirit of Yahweh comes. That's why we blow on the shofar, and a sound that gathers the congregation comes out. So the first ram that our people used to get a shofar from was the ram that Yahweh gave to replace Yitzhak when Yahweh asked of Yitzhak to bring his only son and offer him. When they were walking to get to the mountain where he was going to present Yitzhak or Isaac as an offering, when they were walking along there, Yitzhak asked his father where was the animal that they were going to sacrifice. He already had an idea, but he wanted to make sure, so he asked his father, so where is this animal that we're going to sacrifice? And Abraham gave him a very amazing and prophetical answer. He said, Yahweh will provide a lamb. A lamb. In Hebrew, seh. Then, also a lamb is either a male goat or a sheep of 1 year down. So a lamb is either of those two. And please remember that because it's going to be key for later on. So Yahweh will provide a lamb. When Yitzhak is ready to die and Abraham is ready to take his life because he knew that Yahweh is mighty to bring him back. And this is key also for people who may judge Yahweh as, how can he ask Abraham to do that? There are a lot of things that we could say about what happened there, what the several angels were doing, and why that whole event happened. But it was the will of Yahweh at the end, because we needed to have an example of what Yahweh himself would do by sending his son to die for our sins. So pretty much we could say that since justice was being shown through the Old Testament, Yahweh asked the greatest man at the time to do something in order to see if that man and his seed would be basically worthy of receiving the forgiveness that we would receive through Messiah, through his faith, of course. I mean, by Abraham believing Yahweh, he became worthy, because it is written that he was justified through faith, not through works. Because he believed, he was justified. So that's why I mean that those who have faith are children of Abraham and therefore become worthy of justification. After that comes salvation, which is another thing. But what I'm trying to say here is Abraham, when he was bringing Yitzhak, he told him Yahweh will provide a lamb. When he got everything ready, he raised his hand to sacrifice his son, and an angel told him stop. And when he raised his eyes, he saw a ram. So he had just said that Yahweh would provide a lamb, but then he saw a ram, and he sacrificed the ram instead of Yitzhak. So the lamb that Abraham prophesied that Yahweh would provide was not that ram. That lamb would be Yahushua thousands of years later. That ram was just for that moment. But not only for that, it also has a representation. That ram represents the prophet Eliyahu, who would be sacrificed as the other witness, as a spiritual son of the witness like Moshe. And I want to say several things regarding this. Hopefully I won't forget any. Before going to that, regarding Yahweh asking Abraham to give his son, the point was not just kill him and get rid of him, and that's it. And then we'll see what we will do. The point was not to kill Yitzhak. The point was for Abraham to believe that Yahweh could raise him back, and that's it, that he could bring life back to him. That was the point. Abraham had so much faith that he knew that if he were to obey Yahweh, who had promised Abraham that he would give him the land and a bunch of other things to his seed, being that seed Yitzhak, who had no children, and now he was about to sacrifice. So Abraham knew that there were things that the Creator promised him that he would receive through this son that he is about to give through his sacrifice. So Abraham had so much faith. He knew and he believed that Yahweh would give him all of that through this, his son that he was about to sacrifice. He did it because he knew that Yahweh would raise him from the dead in order to fulfill his promise. So that is the key of that whole test that Abraham had to go through. And that was the 10th test that Abraham went through, which he passed, thankfully. And that's why also the Egyptians had to go through 10 plagues, because none of them was as Abraham. And yeah, therefore they could not pass any of those tests. And that's why the last of the plagues was the death of the firstborn, representing Yitzhak. So since Abraham was willing to give his child, Yahweh saved his children from Egypt, while the Egyptians, who were killing the children of Abraham, had to give their own children as a payment on that plague. So the point of all of that regarding Yitzhak had to do with the fact that Abraham said a lamb, but then a ram was given. The lamb represents Messiah, as we all know already. The ram represents another person that would become a martyr, and that is Eliyahu. Just like he came as John the Baptist and died. However, 2,000 years ago, they came separate, because John the Baptist had his disciples, Yahushua had his disciples. They never mixed. Only two of Yahuhanans went to Yahushua's, which is interesting, but it has to do with the fact that they represent the two different dispensations, one could say, in which this history separates. Those of the flesh and those of the spirit. When Yahushua came, he came to restart the whole thing, the whole story that we find in Genesis and everything. That's why he became the last Adam, as it is written in the New Testament. Just as Adam became the father of all that are of the flesh, Yahushua is the one above all that are of the spirit. So that's why Yahushua is the last Adam. Therefore, Yahuhanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, was the last of the other time. That's why Yahushua also said that of those born of women, none was greater than John the Baptist. But that he who may be small in the kingdom of Yahweh would be greater than John the Baptist. So those of the flesh came to John the Baptist. Then those of the spirit started with Yahushua. That's why they walked in separate ways. That's why John the Baptist did not understand the whole thing, even though he was used by Yahweh to prepare the way. And that's why when he was in jail, he was asking himself and Yahushua through his messengers if he was the Messiah that he was expecting. So that is a huge difference between how it's going to happen now. Because now the two witnesses are of the time of Messiah, of the time of the Spirit. So they will both be within the same doctrine. In fact, as we see in Malachi 4, Yahweh reminds us of Moshe before mentioning Eliyahu, unlike he does in Malachi 3 when he mentions Eliyahu, Messiah, and then the witness like Moshe by calling him the Malach of the covenant. So in the end times, we see then that the two witnesses would be Moshe and Eliyahu. The witness like Moshe and the witness like Eliyahu, Elijah. And since Moshe would be the leader, Eliyahu would be his spiritual son. Just like Aaron was Moshe's spiritual son. Because even though Aaron was older than Moshe, Moshe was chosen And after he was chosen, then through what Moshe was doing, Aaron was chosen. And that's why, as we are seeing in this chapter, Yahweh would talk to Moshe, and then Moshe would talk to Aaron. Because Yahweh said that Moshe would be as Elohim for the Pharaoh and for Israel and for Aaron. And Aaron would be his prophet. So Yahushua as the Kohen Gadol is in heaven at the right hand of the Father, as the Kohen Gadol about to present the last sacrifices to bring all atonement during a Yom Kippur. Then on earth will appear the ram and the bull, the ram and the ox. The ram, I repeat, represents Eliyahu, who comes as the son, spiritual son of Moshe. And I mean that he gets the doctrine from Moshe. That's why he becomes a spiritual son. And that's why when Abraham as Moshe brought his son Yitzhak as Eliyahu, Yahweh gave a ram to replace Yitzhak, because Yitzhak represents both Yahushua in the first coming and Eliyahu in the second coming, or at the end of times. When Abraham said Yahweh will provide a lamb, it was a prophecy of Yahushua coming. When he actually, at that moment, historically provided a ram, was to represent the sacrifice of Eliyahu as a spiritual son of the witness like Moshe. And also, obviously, was to show that there was a promised lamb that was not given at that time, so that we would expect a lamb in the future. So Eliyahu, represented by the ram, he comes as the spiritual son of the witness like Moshe, because now they come together instead of the 2,000 years ago when they came separate with different disciples and everything. So there are other things that I want to say right here, but I think if I read more, they will fall in place. So, thus Aaron shall come into the set apart place with the blood of a young bull. As we see in scriptures, since Yahweh saw history at the end of times, there are several times in which he tells us everything from that perspective. Therefore, for us, seems to be backwards. As in a mirror. When one looks in a mirror, everything is, well, backwards, basically. Well, not backwards, but I forgot the word right now. So, well, you see what you get what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure when you have something written in your shirt, when you see in a mirror, that which is written now. That would be backwards. So the point I'm trying to make is that scriptures is like a mirror, because the scriptures are like water. So Yahweh gives us many prophetical mirrors or reflections through people or through stories, as this one. So it is interesting that Yahushua came as the lamb and the male goat 2,000 years ago. And I will explain that about the male goat, because I don't think that is taught that much, only the lamb part. So 2,000 years ago he came to fulfill those two, but that was 2,000 years ago. Now the two witnesses have to come. We are reading this chapter because of the two witnesses, because it represents the two witnesses, and it mentions first the bull, which happens to be the last sacrifice, the witness like Moshe. So Yahweh mentions him first, because it's as if Yahweh went to the end of times and is explaining everything from that perspective, going back. So backwards. The 12 months of the year have 12 different constellations. Well, the sun is in a different constellation on each of those 12 months. Each of those 12 months and 12 constellations are connected to the 12 tribes of Israel. The first of those months is Aviv, as Yahweh called it, and is connected to Yahudah. although the animal that is connected with Yahudah is the lion, and therefore there is a connection between Leo, the constellation of Leo, and Yahudah. Also, I should also explain a little bit. There are different ways in which the 12 tribes are arranged or ordered, and therefore are different connections that we can make of those tribes to the constellations. One of the most common way of ordering the tribes is with Yahudah as first in the very beginning. And it's interesting that in that order of constellations and tribes, Yahudah is the first, and Ephraim, or Yahusef, known as Joseph, happens to be the seventh. And that is very interesting because the first and seventh month are very, very connected spiritually. Those are the 2 months in which there are we have the most assemblies, basically Moedim, or the feast of Yahweh. The first and the seventh month are very important, and they represent the first and second coming of Yahweh. Yahushua fulfilled the feasts of the first month, which, as I said, most of the time is connected to the tribe of Yahudah. And in that month is the month of the lamb, basically, where the ram, because of the animal that they use. And it is interesting that John the Baptist, as he was also taught in the tradition of Judaism, they thought that Eliyahu would appear, and they still think that Eliyahu will appear during Pesach, during the during the month of Aviv. And John the Baptist was born on that day. They were expecting him all grown up on Pesach. They are still expecting him on Pesach all grown up. But John the Baptist, who happened to be Eliyahu, manifested on earth as a baby through Elisheba and Zechariah on Pesach. So that was fulfilled. And it's interesting because he is the ram, and that is the month of the constellation of the ram. But like I already explained with the story of Yitzhak, the ram and the lamb are very connected. That's why Yahushua, as the lamb, was sacrificed on the month of the ram. I hope everybody's following that. So we already saw a connection of the ram with Eliyahu, and now I am explaining how the tribe of Yahudah is connected to the first month, which is the month in which the constellation of the ram is where the sun is, and is the month in which Yahushua died as the lamb on Pesach. Then the seventh month is the month connected to Yahusef, and is connected with judgment, Libra. So it is interesting. We are in the seventh month right now, and that's why we're going to celebrate Yom Kippur, and it has to do with judgment. And it is when Yahweh will finally forgive the sins of the chosen few, so that they can be transformed and don't have to experience death at all, because of the testimony of the two witnesses, which goes along, of course, with the preaching of Yahushua HaMashiach, the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach, which is the spirit of prophecy. So the fact that it says here a bull, an ox, has to do with the tribe of Yosef. Each tribe, other than connecting with the months through the constellations, has a connection with either an animal or a plant or something. And like I said, Yahudah has a connection with the lion. That's why it has a connection with the constellation of Leo. While Yosef has a connection with the bull. That's why it has a connection with the constellation of the bull. It says Ben Bakar, basically a young bull, a son of the cows. So that represents a descendant of Ephraim, a descendant of Joseph. That's what the bull represents, because the bull is connected with that tribe. Just like a lion is connected with Yehudah, and there are other connections with the other tribes. But Yehudah and Yahusef are the two tribes that we see in Genesis 49 as the two tribes from which Yahweh would come to this earth. Yehudah as the first, and then Yahusef as the last. If you read Genesis 49, which I guess we could do one of these days also, you'll see it very clear. So then it says, verse 3, thus Aaron shall come into the set apart place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering. Sin offering. The blood of the bull was for the sins of Aaron and his sons, meaning the chosen few who received to be kings and priests. This is very important. That's why the second coming, the last, as the ox, comes for the chosen few, preaching to the chosen few, sealing the chosen few. Then it says, and of a ram as a burnt offering. Like I said, the burning connecting to Eliyahu, the fire that he brought down, the ram connected as he will be a spiritual son of the young bull. The fact that it's a burnt offering is to show that it has nothing to do with sin. It has to do with shalom. It has to do with giving thanks to Yahweh. So, as we are about to see, the sacrifice of Yahushua, the Messiah, as the male goat is for the people, for the many. That's why he said this is the blood of the covenant that is, through his blood for the many. So, the male goat, Yahushua, for the many, for the people. The blood of the bull for the few, the sons of Aaron. And then the blood of the ram, which would be Eliyahu, as a burnt offering, as an offering of shalom, or to give thanks, basically. The fact that it says a burnt offering shows how the two witnesses will die. Just like it mentioned the two children of Aaron who died that way, now it mentions a burnt offering because the two witnesses will die from fire that comes down from heaven. And it mentions the ram as the burnt offering to remind us of Eliyahu, who brought down fire from heaven, as the false prophet will do. So it says, verse 4, he shall put the set apart linen tunic and the linen trousers on his body. He shall be girded with a linen sash, and with the linen turban he shall be attired. This shows how, in this case, Aaron is acting as the high priest in heaven. And who's the high priest in heaven? Yahushua. He already fulfilled that part. So he's in heaven dressed in linen because he's ready for the wedding of the Lamb of Revelation 19, in which he's dressed in linen. So then it says, these are set apart garments. Therefore he shall wash his body in water and put them on. Yahushua died and resurrected. That was washing himself in water. And he shall take from the congregation of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats, 2 male goats of 1 year down. Like I said, those are also lambs. In this case, it doesn't say lamb, but it says kid of the goats. And once again, the point here is to see that Yahushua is not only the lamb of Pesach, he's also one of these 2 kids of the goats. And why he appears as a sheep and as a goat when there is a parable in which basically pretty much all Christianity teaches that the goats are the ones that are going to hell. And that's one of the interpretations, of course. But the fact that Yahushua also appeared as one of these goats, and especially in Yom Kippur, is to show that his sacrifice was for the many who act as goats more than as sheep. That's why Yahushua came and gave his blood for the many. Now the last, as the young bull, will give his blood for the few, as we are seeing in this day of Yom Kippur. It is good to study with you. I'm glad well, everybody who is connected, I'm glad you all are still there. Mary says, can we connect Genesis 49:6 with this young bullock? 49:6. Let me see. Genesis 49:6 says, let not my soul enter their council, let not my honor be united to their assembly, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Yeah, this is actually very interesting, because remember that obviously Reuben, Shimon, and Levi became set apart men. They repented of their sins, but they brought a lot of stress to their father's life. So that's why he seems to curse them in the middle of all the blessings that he gave to the rest of his children. But Yahweh made that happen, not in order to curse those three men, but in order to prophesy something that would happen through descendants of them, who would end up killing the first and the last. Because the Levites, of course, became the priests, but Shimon and Reuben became so numbered that they started entering as scribes, Pharisees, and all of that. So they were mostly of these three tribes that Jacob mentions first before mentioning Yahudah. Also, Yahudah is the fourth children, to show that Yahushua would come on the 4,000 year, on the fourth millennium. So also the three first children of Jacob represent the three Satans that I have already mentioned many times. Samael as Reuben, Lucifer or Hillel as Shimon, and Levi as Azazel. That's why the three blessings that are given to them in Genesis 49 are pretty much curses, because it's Yahweh talking about what those three angels did before Yahushua appeared through Yahudah to bring their destruction, bringing life eternal and all of that. So the fact that it says, for in their anger they slew a man, right there Yahweh is talking of the first. For in their anger, their envy, by seeing Yahushua with so much power, they killed him. Amen. And that shows the literal prophetical sense of this verse. And then it goes into the spiritual, which happens to be with the second coming. That's why it goes into the metaphorical, and it says ox instead of a man. But it means a man who would come from Ephraim, from Yahuseph. And in their self-will, they hamstrung an ox. And yeah, in Hebrew it says ish when it talks about the man, which would be Yahushua, and then it says shor, which is an ox. So yeah, that connects with that. Also, let me see something very fast. Yeah, in Deuteronomy 33, where we see almost a, I don't know how to put it, but it's like a second part to Genesis 49, pretty much, because now is Moshe, as Jacob did in Genesis 49, now Moshe giving blessings to the 12 tribes. So it's very nice to see how they connect. In verse 13, I read real quick, and of Joseph he said, blessed of Yahweh is his land, with the precious things of heaven, with the dew, and the deep lying beneath. This connects to the blessing given to him in Genesis 49. Also, it connects with the fact that Yahushua came for the souls. The last comes for the earth, for the land. That's why it talks of the land. I already said that he comes for the few. So some would say, so is it for the few or the land? Remember that when I say for the few, I said for their bodies, so that they can be transformed instead of dying, as the many will have to do, because they only accepted the first. They did not accept the last. Since the few accepted the first and last, their souls and their bodies will be paid for basically through the death of the first and last, so that they won't have to die nor the first nor the second death, because the bodies of humans are made of the land, are made of dust, clay, So the fact that the last is coming for the earth means that it's coming for the bodies also. I hope that was understood. So then verse 14 says, with the precious fruits of the sun, with the precious produce of the months. It says actually of the moons, but they translate months because the moon helps the trees to give fruit. So with the precious fruits of the sun, with the precious produce of the months, with the best things of the ancient mountains, with the precious things of the everlasting hills, with the precious things of the earth and its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush, connecting Joseph to Moshe, who Yahweh called from the burning bush. So, who received the favor from Yahweh's Malach, who is Mikael, who would come from this tribe as the last. Let the blessing come on the head of Yosef and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. From the 144,000, there is one who Yahweh will separate to make him king. That's why he receives the crown, as Joseph dreamt in Genesis, when his brethren got kind of envious of him because of his dreams. So then he says, verse 16, with the precious things of the earth and its fullness and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush, let the blessing come on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. Here it is. His esteem is like a firstborn bull. We see it there. His honor is like a firstborn bull. So Joseph is the bull that has to die on Yom Kippur. I hope this is clear. It's very important. And on his horns, like the horns of the wild ox. Ox, like the bull. And wild, because he's like the prodigal son. Comes dressed in red. That's why wild. As in, he will appear within the nations, not in Israel, because he already came to Israel 2,000 years ago. So now he will come from the nations, as he already prophesied through the prophets. And because Moshe appeared in Egypt, Zerubbabel appeared in Babylon, and there are many other examples regarding that. So his honor is like the firstborn bull, and his horns like the horns of the wild ox. Together with them he shall push the peoples to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Menashe, as in the many and the few, represented by the two horns of the last, the ox. I hope that's clear. Before continuing with Leviticus, does he test like that today when he says you have to love him more than son, mom, etc.? Well, he tests the hearts in the same way, but not to, like, how can I say it? Well, he knows the hearts, so he knows who would and who wouldn't. And in a way, you don't have to sacrifice the person, but you may have to sacrifice the relationship. You may have to sacrifice that so-called friendship or whatever, in the sense that you need to understand what is best for you, and therefore sometimes it is best not to relate to people that may bring you temptation or may want to fight every time they see you because they don't agree with what you believe. Celio says, is it misleading that Yom Kippur is also called Day of Judgment? It seems to support the idea that Yom Teruah is the so-called rapture, and it makes sense to see Yom Kippur as a judgment day. Well, actually, I do agree with the idea that Yom Kippur has to do with judgment, but with because of the fact that it happens on this month, which is on the constellation of Libra, which represents judgment. However, the many of the things that are taught in Judaism regarding Yom Kippur and Yom Teruah, which they actually call Rosh Hashanah, that has to do with what they learned in Babylon. Because of Marduk and the beliefs of Babylon, they incorporated those things to their beliefs of the Torah, and they changed the calendar. They gave new names to the months. They changed the first month to the seventh, and they brought part of the story of Marduk, that he judges the whole world and all of that, to the fact that this month has to do with judgment, as I already explained the reasons why. Now, with the questions that you're saying, is not what may be misleading is whatever they teach after saying those words, because really, Yom Teruah, how can I say it? Because I think it's very clear in scriptures that Yom Teruah is not the rapture. I think it's very clear for many reasons. One, that if you actually go and study regarding the rapture, as I have explained it many times, and maybe I should do it next Tuesday, you can see that it is a wrong doctrine, and it's very clear that it's wrong in many ways that you go at it. I mean, with many verses that you can use to show that. So just the fact that the rapture is such a wrong doctrine is why it's hard for me to see it the way you're mentioning here. But maybe an easier way to say why Yom Teruah is not the rapture is because that doctrine basically teaches that Christians, all they have to do is just await, believe, and they will disappear from the tribulation, which Yahushua said that we had to go through. But they believe they won't. So they pick and choose some verses, they take them out of context, and then they come up with this false hope, unfortunately, which will bring a lot of pain. But to go back to my point, the fact that we see that Yahweh gave 8 appointments, Moedim in Hebrew, 8 appointments in Leviticus 23, out of which 4 have already been fulfilled through the death and resurrection of Messiah and the giving of his spirit to his Talmidim. The fact that they are 8 and 4 of them have already been fulfilled, and the fact that Yahweh said that he would come twice to earth, 4 times 2 is 8, just like the feasts. So it should be very easy to see that the 8 appointments are 8 days in which Yahweh, during the first and the second coming, would fulfill his prophecies. So just as the first coming, which we should use as an example, as Yahweh uses all history, if Messiah came and on the flesh he fulfilled Pesach by dying with no sin, being buried with no sin, fulfilling matzot, lechem without leaven, then he resurrected and presented himself as the first fruit of the dead, the resurrected from, as Bikurim, the feast of Bikurim, and then on Shavuot, Pentecost, he gave the Spirit to the believers. Then that's been 2,000 years, and he said that he would come again as a thief in the night. And he said in the letters to the churches, to the congregations in Revelation 2 and 3, that he would appear in the congregation and fight with the congregation with the sword of his mouth. So how can the congregation be expecting him in the clouds and just to disappear and appear before him when he says, no, I will come down and I will speak to everybody and I will fight with them because they do not repent from the false doctrine that they have been following. And he's coming as a thief in the night. So when he appears and talks to the congregation, they won't realize that it is him talking, because they will believe he's a thief, he's a false prophet, an antichrist, etc. That's why he said, be careful of false prophets and antichrist. Why? Because the real prophet and the real Messiah would appear. If they would not appear as the two witnesses, then Messiah would not have had to say anything. He would have just said, just wait and you will be raptured. Don't believe anything, don't believe anybody, just wait. That's all you have to do. Wait. Revelation would not be written, because what need would be for the book of Revelation if the congregation would not be on earth? And those who don't believe in Yahweh will actually not read it. If those who claim to believe in scriptures don't read the scriptures, how can people expect those who don't believe in scriptures to read them? It's amazing. So just like the first 4 feasts were fulfilled, now the other 4 feasts need to be fulfilled. Unfortunately, Christianity says the first is rapture. So these 3, we're already there, as they say. So why would Yahweh need to make those 3 appointments? Why would he tell us to watch those other 3 days if we would already be in eternity? Why 3 days other than Yom Teruah? Yom Teruah is a moment when everybody will know that everything is coming. Is when the 2 witnesses will be trapped and taken to prison for 10 days, as we see in Revelation. Yom Kippur is when they die. That's why it's a day of sadness. If the rapture were Yom Teruah, as they say, why would those raptured would be sad 10 days later? Why would they have to cry and fast? Makes no sense. They should be happy. And then, why would after that, how would they celebrate Sukkot, which they say is the wedding of the Lamb? But makes no sense. Because how can the wedding of the Lamb happen after Judgment Day? If Judgment Day is 1,000 years after. Judgment Day is after the millennium. The real Judgment Day, the last judgment, is after the millennium. So how could they put the Judgment Day after the rapture and then the wedding of the Lamb as Sukkot, when that doesn't make sense? Because Sukkot represents the Exodus. Sukkot represents the congregation going to the mountains and being there, being protected by the hand of Yahweh. So, in a nutshell, those 4 feasts that we still need to see fulfilled are Yom Teruah, when the 2 witnesses will be trapped. Yom Kippur, when the 2 witnesses will die, which is what we are reading right now. Sukkot, which is the second Exodus, when Yahushua said, when you see the abomination of desolation in the place where it should not be, then go to the mountains. And Shemini Atzeret, which is after Sukkot, which lasts 7 days, comes Shemini Atzeret, which happens to be the feast that almost nobody speaks about, and the feast that represents the reunion between the congregation and Yahweh, the greatest day of all. Obviously, that is the moment of the transformation, the harvest. So, 2 witnesses go to prison on Yom Teruah, and that is the shofar that the people need to hear and wake up. They have 10 days after that to choose if they believe the 2 witnesses or if they believe the system and everything that the system will say about them. Then, on the 10th, they will be killed in a manner that will make everybody in the world who is not of Yahweh believe the false prophet and claim that those 2 were evil, and that's why fire came down from heaven and killed them. 5 days later, the false Messiah will appear, and the chosen few will need to go out of their houses and go to the mountains and wait for Yahweh, as we see it in all the prophets, but it hasn't been taught that much. So that's why many people right here may be surprised. After 7 days of Sukkot, on the 8th, the 7th trumpet will blast, as we just saw in Revelation 11. After the resurrection of the 2 witnesses, which would happen 3 days and a half after Yom Kippur, right here, comes Sukkot 1 day and a half after the second Exodus, and that is when afterwards Shemini Atzeret will happen. So the question said, is it misleading that Yom Kippur is also called the Day of Judgment? It seems to support the idea that Yom Teruah is the so-called rapture. It makes sense to see Yom Kippur as a judgment day. No, it doesn't make sense really, Celio, when you see it with scriptures. I know that it may make sense the way they order it and they explain it, but if it doesn't fit scriptures, it makes no sense. That's what I mean by sense. Scriptures. So, I go back to Leviticus, and he said on verse 5, and he shall take from the congregation of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. So we mentioned a ram before, but now he's mentioning another ram. Although it's the same, basically, the fact that he mentions 1 with the bullock and 1 with the 2 kids shows that Eliyahu had to come with Yahushua 2,000 years ago as the male goat, and now Eliyahu has to come with the bull, with the descendant of Joseph. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. We know that Yahushua has committed no sin. So Yahushua doesn't need forgiveness of sins. He doesn't need to present anybody in order for Yahweh to forgive him. However, the congregation that has been on earth is his body, and the congregation has fallen in sin through the apostasy of the past 2,000 years, which represents the worship of the golden calf. That's why a calf, an ox, a bull, has to appear to atone for that sin of worshiping Baal for the last 40 jubilees. Because just as the Israelites came out of Egypt and started worshiping the golden calf, and then they had to walk for 40 years, and then Moshe and Aaron died, and then they entered the land, represents that Yahushua the Lamb died so that the Israelites could come out of the enslavement of sin. But then they started worshiping Baal, the Lord, the calf, the golden calf, offered to them by Romans and all the false doctrine that Christianity became. So the past 2,000 years, which happened to be 40 jubilees, represent those 40 years in the desert. So the congregation, even though they claim to believe in Messiah, they have been following a different doctrine, a golden calf. So now the ox, the descendant of Joseph, has to appear to atone for the sins of the body of Messiah, as the bull was to atone for the sins of Aaron and his children. I hope that's clear. And if it's not, please make questions regarding that, because it is important that everybody understands. So Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. So Yahushua will present the last, the descendant of Joseph, as a sacrifice in order for his house, the chosen few, to be atoned for in every way, soul and body, so that they can be transformed and enter his presence alive. Verse 7, he shall take the 2 goats. This is very important. He shall take the 2 goats and present them before Yahweh at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. I hope this reminds everybody of something regarding Messiah. Remember that when Messiah was on earth about to be sacrificed for our sins, let's go to Matthew 27. Although this story is in all the Gospels, I'm just going to read this one, not to last that long because we still have a lot to go. Matthew 27, verse 15 says, now at the feast, right there it doesn't say what feast. We know historically, chronologically, it was the feast of Pesach. So Yahushua was about to be sacrificed as the lamb. However, in this book, and mainly in the Gospel of John, we can see how what appears there, the story, the way John puts it, is to show the second coming. And I hope that's clear, because it is very important. In this case, also, well, the book of Matthew speaks of Messiah as a king, so that kings could believe through this writing. The book of Luke speaks of Messiah as a man, so that any man can relate to Messiah and believe through that book. The book of Mark speaks of Messiah as a servant, so that any servant, any slave could relate to Messiah and believe in him through the book of Mark. And the book of John speaks of Messiah as the Malach, as the angel of Yahweh, as the messenger of Yahweh. So it represents the second coming of Michael as the last. But the fact that Matthew speaks of him as the king represents the last also, because Messiah came as the high priest. Like I always say, also the Old Testament speaks of the last in a clear, literal way, while it speaks of the first in a spiritual, mysterious way. That's why when Yahushua the first came, they were expecting the last, and they didn't recognize the first because they only understood the Torah regarding the last. So they said, this didn't fulfill, so we don't believe in you, and they still say it. On the other hand, the New Testament speaks literally about what Messiah did in every way, physical, literal. But everything that is written in the New Testament has to do with the second coming in a mysterious, spiritual way. So Christians who believe in the New Testament will go through the same thing that Jewish people did 2,000 years ago, and they will reject the two witnesses, just like Jewish people rejected Messiah and John the Baptist. So the fact that it says here a feast takes us to the fact that Yahushua was fulfilling a feast, but in a physical way he was fulfilling Pesach. In a spiritual way he was fulfilling Yom Kippur, a part of Yom Kippur. In this part that I am about to read has to do with the part of the two kids of the goats, the two male goats that they had to bring to the temple and present before Yahweh. So in Leviticus 16, what I just read said, and Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall take the two goats and present them before Yahweh at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the two goats, one lot for Yahweh and the other lot for Azazel. Some call it Azazel. Azazel here is mentioned by name. Is the only part in the entire scriptures that Azazel is mentioned by name. Obviously, if we don't mention the book of Hanok, where it's mentioned a lot. But other than the book of Hanok, in the entire scriptures, this is the only place where this angel appears by name, and it is a key place, once again. Some translate this as scapegoat, because they did not understand that name, that word as a name. Perhaps also the enemy trying to hide one of his names. So it says, and Aaron shall bring the goat. Well, is it? Then Aaron shall cast lots for the two goats, one lot for Yahweh and the other lot for the Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the goat on which Yahweh's lot fell and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be for Azazel shall be presented alive before Yahweh. So that would not be sacrificed at all. To make atonement upon it and to let it go for Azazel into the wilderness. So they would have to bring two male goats. They would throw lots. Those two male goats were supposed to look alike, completely like if they were the same. They were to be set apart and everything, of course, because they were for sacrifice. But when they would throw the lots, one would be for Yahweh, one would be for Azazel. Azazel as the angel that fell in the time of Noah and became the worst of all the angels, and through his advice, humanity fell in a sin never seen before and started growing to the point where we found ourselves nowadays in the worst generation. That's why in the book of Hanok it is written that Azazel was blamed for all the sins of humanity. So just like Yahushua HaMashiach paid for all our sins in order for Yahweh to forgive us, Azazel, as the counterpart, as the false Messiah, is the one who will take all the blame for our sins, according to the book of Hanok and according to this ritual that we are reading here. Because Yahweh mentions Azazel and sends a goat that represents him, Azazel, the false Messiah. alive to the wilderness, just like the false Messiah will appear as if he was alive in this world, which is wild. While the world sacrificed Messiah Yahushua as the goat for Yahweh. So this is very important for everybody to understand. And as I go back to Matthew 27, it says, verse 15, now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. This is amazing because they had just this custom. And it's just tradition of the Romans that happened to fit right, like perfect with the feast that the Jews were having, and with Yom Kippur, which still needs to be completed. So Messiah, as Yahweh is showing us in this chapter, was fulfilling the first half of Yom Kippur 2,000 years ago. Now the two witnesses need to fulfill the second half of Yom Kippur. So it says, and at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Barabbas. In Hebrew, or in this case Aramaic, that would be Bar Abba. Bar Abba. Bar means son. Abba means father. Ab in Hebrew is father. So Bar Abba means son of the father. And some writings, even this Matthew in another translations, says that his name was Yeshu or Yeshua Bar Abba, meaning salvation, Yeshua, the son of the father. And they brought him as one of the male goats. And then they brought Yahushua, the son of the father, Yahweh. So there was Yeshua, the son of the father, in Aramaic, as in representing perversion of the name and perversion of the doctrine through different languages. And on the other side we had Yahushua ben Yahweh, or ben Abba. So Yeshua bar Abba, Yahushua ben Av, Yahushua the son of the father, as the two male goats of Yom Kippur. Their names were so much alike to represent that they are the two goats that had to be very much alike. So it says, just a second. Yeah. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release to you? This was the representation of Aaron as Pilate, the Kohen Agadol as Pilate, who had the authority, the power to sacrifice Messiah. We have Pilate throwing lots, basically by asking the multitude, who do you want? Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release to you? Barabbas, Yeshu Barabbas, or Yahushua, who is called Hamashiach? For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. So Yahweh revealed to that woman that Mashiach was a just, a righteous man. Then it says, but the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Yahushua. Destroy Yahushua. The word used connects to Barabbas as Azazel, because Azazel is who became Abaddon, the destroyer, mentioned in Revelation 9. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Yahushua. The governor answered and said to them, which of the two do you want me to release to you? Throwing lots. They said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, what then shall I do with Yahushua, who is called Hamashiach? They all said to him, let him be sacrificed. Let him be sacrificed. as the goat for Yahweh. So there was one sacrifice for the sins of the people. There was one released for Azazel alive. Here we see that people, following the Pharisees' advice, decided to kill Messiah. And the Pharisees thought they were just getting rid of him, destroying his name and his image as Messiah, King, and everything that he is and means. However, they did not get it because they did not have understanding. They had their eyes closed spiritually by the veil of Satan. They did not understand that they were presenting Messiah as the goat for the sins of the people, while Barabbas was sent to Azazel. So, let him be sacrificed. Then the governor said, Why? What evil has he done? By Pilate saying this is saying that he had no sin. Therefore, he was the perfect sacrifice for our sins. But they cried out all the more, saying, Let him be sacrificed. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it. And all the people answered and said, His blood be on us and on our children. So the false Yahudim asked to be blamed for Messiah's death. Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Yahushua, he delivered him to be sacrificed. So, in all this story that I just mentioned, it didn't say Pesach, it just said feast. Why? Because it was for us to understand that it represented the first half of the feast of Yom Kippur, which we are seeing right here. And Aaron, as Pilate, shall cast lots for the two goats, as Yahushua and Barabbas, one lot for Yahweh, Yahushua, and the other lot for Azazel, Barabbas. And Aaron shall bring the goat on which Yahweh's lot fell, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be for Azazel shall be presented alive before Yahweh to make atonement upon it, and to let it go as the scapegoat, as Azazel into the wilderness. That is important also because in the Talmud, the Israelites made such a mistake as they do because of the commandments of men. Because Yahweh sent this right here, let that goat go alive. They had to put all the sins of the people on the head of that goat and then let it go. They would tie a string, a scarlet string, that would be cut in half, one on the goat for Azazel and one in the temple. Once the sacrifice through the goat for Yahweh was done and the goat for Azazel was gone, when that goat would get out of the limits of Israel, the scarlet string would turn white. If Yahweh accepted the sacrifice and the people would turn white as a miracle, as a confirmation that their sins were clean. Then the Israelites started thinking that since that goat was an animal and they would let it go free, perhaps that goat would then return to Israel with all the sins of the people. So they decided to make a commandment of men and take that goat very far from the people and then throw it off a cliff. So at the end they would kill it, breaking the commandment and the ritual of Yom Kippur, breaking the whole thing. And even worse, sacrificing an animal for Azazel, which obviously they will claim that is not a sacrifice, is not idolatry, etc. But the fact that they were killing one for Yahweh and then taking another one and killing it somewhere else for Azazel, that's a sacrifice. He shall take a censer full of burning coals. No questions. Great. So I'll continue with the verse. And Aaron shall bring the bull of the sin offering. In the Midrash and other books that speak about all the rituals that were done on Yom Kippur and other feasts, when it came to Yom Kippur, it was very clear about all the steps that had to be done on that great feast. By the way, also another commandment by men and not by Yahweh was that since the third commandment had to do with destroying or changing or blaspheming against the name of Yahweh, they said it is better if we prohibit the people from pronouncing the name. So let's forbid them from pronouncing the name, and only the high priest will pronounce the name, and only once a year, and only in the most set apart place, meaning where nobody else can hear him. So that's why the people forgot eventually the name, and Messiah had to come and reveal it again. And the Pharisees claimed that Messiah entered the most set apart place and wrote the name on his thigh and then came out, and that's how he was able to make all the miracles that he made, according to the Toldot Yeshu, where they say that not only he entered, according to them, the most set apart place, wrote the name on his thigh, and then came out and made all the miracles through that name. Then, according to them, he forgot the name, and that's why they were able to kill him. So, here we see, and like I was saying with the Midrash, it says that the high priest would sacrifice the bull, like we just saw, and the male goat for Yahweh, while the other sacrifice was being done. They would have to keep the blood of the bull moving for it to remain basically liquid. So they would have to move it, and then when they would make the other sacrifice for sins, which was the goat, the male goat, the bull and male goat for sins, the bull for the sins of Aaron and the priests, and the male goat for the sins of the people, then they would put the blood of both in one vessel. So the blood of the last and the blood of the first would come together. The soul is in the blood. So by uniting the blood of the bull and the blood of the male goat represents that once the first and last have come, died, and resurrected, they will become one. Their soul will be united as one in one vessel, one body, as we also see in Ezekiel 37, which I was thinking about reading, but I don't think we'll have time. So Ezekiel 37, the second half of it, is where it speaks of how Yahweh will unite the first and last as one. One from Yehudah, one from Yahusef, and they will become one person. Just like the few and the many will become one flock, one people. So, and Aaron shall bring the bull of the sin offering which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall kill the bull as the sin offering which is for himself. Then he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before Yahweh. That's why this is mentioned, burning coals and the censer. The incense basically is mentioned in Revelation when two witnesses finish and other things happen, when it changes from the seals to the trumpets, from the trumpets to the plagues, to the last 7 plagues, for instance. Then he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before Yahweh, like the burning fire that will come down from heaven to destroy earth during the 7 last plagues, and like the prayers and works of the righteous that come up to Yahweh like incense. Then he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before Yahweh, with his hands full of sweet incense beaten fine, and bring it inside the veil. According to Judaism, this was the hardest thing that the high priest would do, because he would have to come in with a lot of instruments. He could not make a mistake, so he would come with a spoon full of incense in his mouth and other things on his hands. So they say that was the hardest thing, the thing about the incense. Then it says, well, and just because of that, in Revelation 5:8 says, "Now when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the righteous," the Kadoshim in that case. Revelation 8:3, "Then another angel having a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the Kadoshim upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the Kadoshim, the set apart ones, ascended before Yahweh from the Malach's hand." Now I'll go back to Leviticus, verse 13. "And he shall put the incense on the fire before Yahweh, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony, lest he die." So he shall put the incense on the fire, which represents prayers and good works. "And he shall put the incense on the fire." The consuming fire is the second coming, just like Yahushua is the water of life. Water and fire make up heaven when they come together like the blood of the bull and the blood of the male goat. Because in Hebrew, heavens is Shamaim. Shamaim is the mix of the words Esh and Maim, fire and water. When they come together, they bring heaven on earth. So when the first and last, water and fire, come together, the will of heaven will be fulfilled on earth. So it says regarding "And he shall put the incense on the fire before Yahweh, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony," representing the presence of Yahweh, because he comes with the clouds, as he said, like a thief in the night, in darkness, like the set apart place, as the throne. It says 14, "He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat of the east side." Of the east side, there we see that the bull would come from the east. Messiah came from the east, the last come from the west, like I was saying, Occident. When it comes to this, Yahushua said that the last is as the son of justice, and we know that the sun comes from the east and ends at the west. So that's why Yahweh said that the first, Yahushua, as the lamb, would come from the east, and then the last would come from the west. We see that in Isaiah. "He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side. And before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times, to bring completion, forgiveness, mercy on the throne," meaning through the death of the king, the last, because Yahushua came as the high priest. When it comes to that east side thing also, there it is said by some, and I say it like that because I cannot confirm it, but it is said by some that the Ark of the Covenant had the east and the west side, and that the east side where was the place where the blood of animals was placed, and that the west side was never used to put blood. And that is, like I just explained, because it had to do with the second coming for once. But what they say is that when they hid the Ark of the Covenant, they happened to hide it right under Golgotha, where Messiah was killed. So it is said that that west side part of the tabernacle was being saved for the blood of the human, for the blood of Messiah to come down. When the earthquake happened, the blood came through the earth and fell on the west side of the ark to complete all sacrifices, those of the animals and for the sins of men. So I continue. "And before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times, because the last comes to enter the 7th millennium, the Shabbat, as the 7 days of creation. That's why, to bring completion for the sins of humanity. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people. Bring its blood inside the veil. Do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, the same, first and last. and sprinkle it on the mercy seat and before the mercy seat. So he shall make atonement for the set apart place, because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions for all their sins. And so he shall do for the Mishkan, for the tent of meeting, which remains among them in the midst of their uncleanness. There shall be no man in the tent of meeting when he goes in to make atonement in the set apart place. We see in scriptures in Revelation that when the two witnesses die, resurrect, and go in to heaven, where the ark appears all of a sudden in the temple, or is seen in the temple, as we just read in Revelation 11, then we see later in Revelation that when the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets came out of the temple to go, and with the 7 plagues, with the 7 bowls of wrath, when the 7 angels came out with the 7 bowls of wrath, nobody could enter the temple until the 7 bowls of wrath were spilled on earth, the 7 last plagues. So right here is saying that nobody else could be there, because it represents the time after the trumpets, when the 7 angels with the bowls of wrath are coming out to throw them on earth. And that also happened when Shlomo inaugurated the temple. So then he shall, I already said that, there shall be no man in the tent of meeting when he goes in to make atonement in the set apart place, until he comes out, that he make atonement for himself, for his household, and for all the assembly of Israel. And he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahweh, and make atonement for it, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat. That's what I was saying, that they would mix the blood of the goat and the blood of the bull. We just saw how he was to put that blood first separate on the mercy seat. So the mercy that would come for the few would come in a separate way, first as Yahushua, and then as the last male goat and the bull. Since Yahweh is seeing it from the end times, from a different perspective, that's why he says the bull first and then the male goat. So now that he is going to atone for the altar, which represents those who die, the many, because the altar is where everybody would bring their offerings and their animals would be sacrificed. Now they mixed the blood, because by the time the many will be resurrected and their sins justified through the blood of Messiah, by that time the first and last will be one already. So it says, and he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahweh and make atonement for it, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat. Just like I said, the temple is the body of Messiah. That's why the congregation is the temple. The ark is the throne, the last. And he comes to build the temple. So one could say that the throne, the ark of the covenant, represents the chosen few, just like the temple. But then it's talking about the altar, which represents those who will die because of and through their belief will be justified. So, and he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahweh and make atonement for it, and he shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat and put it on the horns of the altar all around. Then he shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his fingers 7 times. Cleanse it and consecrate it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. And when he has made an end of atoning for the set apart place, the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. The live goat. So this is also perfect, because it means that after the death of the first and the death of the last, who will appear on earth? The live goat, Baphomet, he who is worshipped by Masons and Illuminati. Azazel, who is now called Abaddon, and in Greek Apollyon, who comes out of the abyss in Revelation 9. He will get a body and appear on earth after the death of the 2 witnesses, after the death of the goat, Yahushua, the ram, Eliyahu, and the bull, the witness like Moshe. Then he will appear on earth as if he was alive, as he will say to be life itself, because he will claim to be Messiah. And when he has made an end of atoning for the set apart place, meaning when Yom Kippur already happened and fulfilled through the death of the two witnesses, the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel, and all other transgressions concerning all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a suitable man. A suitable body will be made for the soul of that goat, which is Azazel. And it's also interesting the fact that somebody's going to have to pay for those sins. I mean, Yahushua paid with his blood, but now somebody will be blamed still for those sins. That's what I meant. Just like Yahushua died, Azazel will take the blame. And it says, the goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to an uninhabited land, which will be this earth afterwards, after everything that will happen. And also, obviously, the dimension where they'll be taken afterwards. Hell, and then the lake of fire. Iniquities to an uninhabited land, because this land, this world, was created in order for men to inhabit it. However, those who follow the false Messiah will be taken to a place that was not made for men, was made for Satan and his angels. Pretty much what would be represented by this uninhabited land. And he shall release the goat in the wilderness. Then Aaron shall come into the into the tent of meeting, shall take off the linen garments which he put on when he went into the set apart place, and shall leave them there. I also want to notice how the whole chapter started with the death of the two children of Aaron, but that was the only mention of it. There was nothing else afterwards. In the middle of this that we are reading, in the chapter 15, which I read the last verses that had to do with the purity of male and female. So Yahweh mentioned the death of the two children of Aaron to represent the two witnesses. Then it says 24, and he shall wash his body with water in a set apart place, put on his garments, come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, and make atonement for himself. Look how it says, come out and offer his burnt offering, meaning basically one ram for him, and the burnt offering of the people, one ram for the people. So as Yahushua came with John the Baptist, Yahushua gave his blood for the many, John the Baptist, the ram for the people. Now the two witnesses come. Witness like Moshe is the bull for Aaron and his sons, and the ram is the burnt offering for Aaron's sons also, as we are seeing here. And make atonement for himself and for the people. The fat of the sin offering he shall burn on the altar. So we see that both the ram and the bull have to die through fire, because even though one is a burnt offering and one is atonement for sin, afterwards its fat has to be burned. It says, the fat of the sin offering he shall burn on the altar, and he who released the goat as the scapegoat, he who released the goat for Azazel shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. Basically immersion. And afterward he may come into the camp. The bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, meaning the last and the first, witness like Moshe and Yahushua, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the set apart place, shall be carried outside the camp, and they shall burn in the fire their skins, their flesh, and their offal. Then he who burns them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward he may come into the camp. Meaning that those that kill the two witnesses as they kill Messiah will be impure afterwards, of course. This shall be a statute forever for you. This shall be a statute. They use this, the fact that it is a chok, to say that sacrifices, and I say this also because of cellular that is connected. Some use this type of thing to say that animal sacrifices need to be done forever and ever and ever. Not understanding one thing about Hebrew, for instance, is that sometimes forever doesn't mean forever. What I mean by that is that even though in English forever means what it means because is in English, in Hebrew the word olam means a period of time, either temporal or eternal. But most translators always put eternal when they see olam. In this case, I'm gonna make sure it's verse 29. Yeah, olam. For instance, when we read the laws about the slaves, a slave, once he chose to remain a slave, he would be a slave forever, says the scriptures. However, it is understood in Judaism that meant until the next Jubilee. So, Jubilee, 50 years, represents a forever in this earth, in this reality which is temporal. Obviously, we can take this to represent the eternal, because in the spiritual sense, what Yahweh is saying here is that we will always remember forever, eternally, the death of Yahushua and the death of the last and Eliyahu as the forgiveness of sins that Yahweh gave us through their blood. So that is what we will always remember and, make remembrance of each and every Yom Kippur. But the animal sacrifices are not needed, and Yahweh did not request them. However, Yahweh allowed them to be made in order for us to understand the sacrifices of men that would happen in history. So this shall be a statute forever for you. In the 7th month, we are in that month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your souls. Here, Yahweh is saying, be sad. On this day, you have to be sad. Just like Yahweh tells us every day that we should be joyful, glad. There is one day in the whole year that he says, but this day you should be sad. Amazingly enough, Yahushua did not die on that day. And still, Yahweh chose this day to be the one in which everybody should be sad about. So Yahushua died on Pesach. The 2 witnesses died on Yom Kippur. Since the 2 witnesses are the heads, the leaders of the people, is that Yahweh tells the people that they should be sad on that day because their leaders will be killed. And if somebody is not sad about the death of the 2 witnesses, is because he doesn't believe in the 2 witnesses and actually hates them. So Yahweh says if a person doesn't afflict his or her soul during Yom Kippur, is because they don't care about the 2 witnesses. And if they don't care about the 2 witnesses, I don't care about them. And that's why they are cut from the people. Because Yahweh said, whoever doesn't listen to the prophet like Moshe, Deuteronomy 18, that person will have to face me, will have to answer to me. If people don't listen to the witness like Moshe, they will have to answer to Yahweh, because he brings judgment. So, in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your souls. This, a way of afflicting the soul, is by fasting, basically. So the way it is interpreted for us to afflict our souls is basically by not eating or drinking anything for 24 hours. From the afternoon of the 9th of the 7th month to the afternoon of the 10th of the 7th month, according to Leviticus 23. And do not work at all. This is a Shabbat Shabbaton. Is the Shabbat of Shabbat. That's why nobody should work. And do not work at all, whether a native of your own country or a stranger who dwells among you. For on that day the priest shall make atonement for you. Verse 30, I read it as it is translated, but in Hebrew says, because, I'm translated literally, because on that day, ki bayom hazeh, he will make atonement. Yechaper aleichem, he will make atonement for you. So it doesn't say the priest, it just says he, because it means Yahweh through the first and last will bring atonement for us. And it says, for on that day he will make atonement for you to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before the face of Yahweh. So on the 10th, that's why Yahushua fulfilled half. But why did he die on Pesach? Because still there are two people that need to die on Yom Kippur. If Yahushua would have come and he would have died on Yom Kippur, nobody would be expecting nobody to die on Pesach. So there are many reasons why Yahushua fulfilled the physical part of Pesach and the spiritual part of Yom Kippur in one day, with one body, one blood. So, for on that day he will make atonement for you to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before Yahweh. It is a Shabbat, Shabbaton. It is a Shabbat of solemn rest for you. Rest, because in that day the chosen few will finally rest from all their sins, and well, they will have to wait very few days, and after that they will have eternal life, new bodies, and a bunch of other things that Yahweh promised us. It is a Shabbat of solemn rest for you, and you shall afflict your souls. You shall afflict your souls. This is interesting because normally one should not afflict one soul on Shabbat. One should get happy on a Shabbat. But this Shabbat will be different, because on this Shabbat the two witnesses will be killed. So that's why Yahweh says this, that is very different from the rest of the Shabbatot. It is a Shabbat of solemn rest for you, and you shall afflict your souls. It is a statute forever. And the priest who is anointed, verse 32 in Hebrew, and he who atones, the HaKohen, Asher Yimshach, which is basically, if we get that verb, that he's anointed, Yimshach, and bring the yud and put it at the, well, one before last, we get the name Mashiach, we get the word Mashiach. So here is saying that Aaron is represented by Mashiach right now at the right hand of the Father, who presents the two witnesses in the sacrifice on Yom Kippur. So Yimshach is basically he who will be anointed, or he will be anointed. However, here we get this yud and put it right after the shin, and we got Mashiach, the anointed one. So we are seeing in that verse, it said, and the priest who is anointed and set apart to minister as priest in his father's place, showing how Yahushua is in the place of Yahweh. Let me go back to the Hebrew real quick. And he will atone the Kohen who is anointed and who is pure, perfect, complete. Alright. And it says, and the priest who is anointed and set apart or complete to minister as priest in his father's place shall make atonement and put on the linen clothes and the set apart garments. Then he shall make atonement for the set apart place, and he shall make atonement for the tent of meeting, and for the altar, and he shall make atonement for the priest and for all the people of the assembly. This shall be an everlasting statute for you, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. Once a year. And that year represents the entire history. That's why Yahushua only had to die once in history. The last only has to die once in history, and Eliyahu in the spiritual history only has to die once, even though 2 rams were mentioned in the chapter, because Eliyahu appeared next to Messiah the first, and next to the last will appear in the end times. And he did as Yahweh commanded Moshe. So there we end that chapter. I'm gonna go see if there are any questions. Celio says Psalm 40, Isaiah 1 is an interesting reminder that Yahweh didn't need blood from animals. Yeah, there are several parts in scripture that are very clear regarding that, and just since there are no questions, I will just go there real quick. Verse 6 of Psalm 40, David as a prophet understood and wrote, sacrifice and offering you did not desire. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire. It was a different entity who desired those sacrifices and offerings. However, Yahweh used them in order to teach us stuff regarding what he would do. So, sacrifice and offering you did not desire. My ears you have opened, meaning you have made me understand. Burnt offering and sin offering you did not require. So when he says sacrifice and offering you did not desire, represents Yahushua and John the Baptist 2,000 years ago. My ears you have opened through the death of Messiah by giving us his spirit. Burnt offering, meaning the sacrifice of the 2 witnesses. Eliyahu, burnt offering and sin offering, the sacrifice of the witness like Moshe, you did not require, but meaning the sacrifices of animals. He did not require those animals, but he used them to show us the 3 people that he would send. Then I said, behold, I come, in the scroll of the book is written of me. So here the last realizes about this and presents himself as the ox that will be sacrificed. Then in Isaiah 1, Yahweh himself says, verse 10, hear the word of Yahweh, you rulers of Sodom. Remember that today's Israel is as Sodom, meaning the state of Israel. That's why the 2 witnesses will be killed there in the place that spiritually is Sodom. Give ear to the law of our Elohim, you people of Gomorrah. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me? As we know, Sodom and Gomorrah would not give sacrifices to Yahweh. It was Israel. However, Yahweh is calling Israel here Sodom and Gomorrah because they are acting the same way. Sodom and Gomorrah as Yahudah and Israel. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me, says Yahweh? I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed cattle. I do not delight in the blood of bulls, or in the lambs or goats, meaning the animals, but he's mentioning the only animals that represent the 3 people that he will send. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams, which represent the sacrifice of Eliyahu, and the fat of fed cattle represents the many people that have died through the ages as martyrs. I do not delight in the blood of bulls, representing the witness like Moshe, descendant of Joseph, or of the lambs or goats. Look how he puts lambs and goats on the same phrase, because both represent Yahushua from Pesach and then Yom Kippur. When you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand? Yahweh himself is asking the people, who required this from your hand? Because it wasn't me. Yet people still claim that sacrifices must be done to Yahweh. It makes no sense when Yahweh himself is saying it was an angel who fooled you into thinking that I, Yahweh, wanted animals as sacrifices. Because as scripture also says, and I'm not going to go read every verse regarding that subject, scripture says that the Gentiles, they sacrifice to demons. And scripture also shows us, as we are reading right here, that Israel sacrificed to fallen angels. There are 3 types of entities that are against us. Demons, evil spirits, and fallen angels. The demons came out of Samael, were created by Samael, and are under Samael as the lion that is roaring and looking for him who may devour, for whom he may devour. Then comes Lucifer, who is above the fallen angels, and he is the spirit, the prince of the air, the Elohim of this world. But as I just said, the lion goes through earth. The prince of the spirit of the air is on a second heaven, from hence is going to fall on Revelation 12. And then comes Azazel, who is above the evil spirits, which came out of the Nephilim. So, to what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me, says Yahweh? I already read that. Verse 12, when you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand? To trample my courts. Bring no more futile sacrifices. Incense is an abomination to me. Your months, meaning your calendar, your Shabbat, and the calling of assemblies, Moedim, I cannot endure iniquity and set apart meeting. So he keeps talking about how the people listened to angels and followed wrong doctrines, and they became all twisted and did a bunch of other things other than sacrifices, changed the calendar and a bunch of other things. So yeah, scriptures are very clear about sacrifices of animals being done. If they are pagans, they were done for demons. But if they claim to believe in the Almighty of the scriptures, but still decided to sacrifice animals, they would be done for Lucifer, a fallen angel. And let's see if there are any questions after that one. I'm glad you're enjoying, Bahit. I'm very glad. Hopefully you remain with us for our next studies every Tuesday. And I actually wanted to ask Celio, when we start at 7, what time is it where you live? Just so I know. And Celio, what was that face? So anyways, I guess I'm going to close right now. I don't see any more questions. I'm glad people seem to be interested and enjoyed the study. Hopefully all of you and more will join us for the future studies. We can you can also let me know. You can write through here or to my email, info@thewayofyahweh.org. I think that should work. Yeah, I'm not sure if that email is working still. And but if not, I will write my email right here. If the other one that I said doesn't work, then this one does work. And you can tell me other subjects that you may want to hear about. You can, I guess, with the way we can do it from now on is you guys tell me a chapter of scriptures, and we go through that chapter and see what other parts of scriptures connects with and everything, so that we eventually may go through the entire scriptures if Yahweh gives us enough time. So blessings everybody.